A few years ago, I took one of my great-grandsons to a classic car show. It was in a small town with the two main streets in town and the main intersection closed off for the show. It was one of the best shows of its type I've attended over the years, and he really enjoyed it too. There were many unusual and great-looking vehicles to look over, but near the end of the tour, just as we were about to turn the corner onto a side street where I had parked, I spotted the best-looking vehicle at the entire show. It was like love at first sight. It was a Studebaker Avanti. Don't remember now if it was a 63 or 64, but it was a beauty. Unlike some of the gaudy, chrome-laden cars of the late 50s, it was sleek and classy looking. I haven't seen a better-looking automobile before or since. Having grown up in the 60s in an area where Ford and, to a lesser extent, Chrysler and General Motors dominated the landscape, you saw very little of Studebaker, especially since they closed up shop in the U.S. by the end of 1963, and this was the first time I had seen an Avanti in person. Today's video takes a look at Avantis from the 1963 model year, as displayed at various classic car shows. Studebaker didn't start initially in the automotive industry. Their history in the transportation industry dates long before that to the horse and buggy era, being established by the Studebaker brothers in 1852. In 1902, they began building electric vehicles, moving to gasoline-powered vehicles a few years later. Through the early years of the automotive industry in America, there were many car manufacturers, but as the industry consolidated, most were absorbed into larger companies, or simply went out of business. By the 1950s, only a few of these remained, standing up to the so-called Big Three, GM, Ford, and Chrysler. One of these was Studebaker, but increasing production costs, price wars between Ford and GM, and other factors left Studebaker with financial woes. A merger with Packard was supposed to help the situation, but didn't. But Studebaker continued innovating, introducing the Hawk line in 1956, the Golden Hawk being the top of the line. As a collector of recordings of old radio shows, I recall the Golden Hawk getting a mention on several episodes of the Johnny Dollar multi-part serials, which were, in my opinion, among the most well-produced radio dramas of the era. Here are a few clips starring Bob Bailey in the title role.
On the way, he spoke of the weather, the situation in Algiers, the trouble he had making reservations for weekends in Palm Springs, and the low fuel consumption of his new Studebaker Golden Hawk. The fine old home looked as though it had stood there in all its straight-laced dignity for 100 years, and stolid against the changing world would stand for another 100. In sharp contrast, a lithe, clean Studebaker Golden Hawk was parked in the sweeping driveway at the front. And it was then I noticed the little Studebaker Golden Hawk that I'd seen at the house pull up beside the platform, and the girl, Dorothy Harkness, jumped out and ran over to me.
By the early 60s, things at Studebaker were especially dire. They needed to come up with something groundbreaking or face total collapse. It was then that company president Sherwood Egbert doodled an idea for a concept car on the back of an envelope. The well-respected design team of Raymond Loewy took it and designed the Avanti, the Italian word for forward, in record time. It was promoted as America's only 4-passenger high-performance personal car and the fastest production car in the world. With its supercharged 289 cubic inch engine, a modified Avanti beat 29 world speed records at the Bonneville Salt Flats and introduced a number of innovations, including its airflow coming from under the front bumper rather than through a traditional grille above the bumper. Announced to the world at the New York International Auto Show on April 26, 1962, orders began to pour in. First model year sales were projected to be 20,000. But manufacturing delays, mainly relating to the fiberglass body, the production of which had been outsourced, resulted in less than 4,000 of the 1963 model being produced. The delays caused many of those who pre-ordered and other potential buyers to lose confidence in Studebaker, a company that had maintained an excellent public image over many years, and many moved on to purchase other models from other brands. What was supposed to be Studebaker's saving grace began to hurt more than help. They simply could not keep up with demand. That's why I say the Avanti was too good for its own good. Demand was there, but production couldn't meet the demand. Manufacturing of the 1964 model ended on December 26, 1963, with the closing of Studebaker's main factory and headquarters in South Bend, Indiana, with fewer than 1,000 being produced. It is said that salespeople at Studebaker dealerships, not knowing what was about to happen, were taking vehicle orders even on that last day. Studebaker continued in Canada for a few more years, but the end of Studebaker on the American automobile scene had come. It should be noted that the rights and remaining parts of the Avanti were purchased by the owners of a Studebaker dealership in South Bend, and the making of a handmade version continued under various companies and iterations until the early 1990s. Both the original Studebaker Avanti and the ones that followed are prized by collectors and greatly admired by many outside the collector community. Since you're interested in classic cars, you may want to check out my videos on Madman Muntz, and more specifically his classic from a decade earlier, the Muntz Jet. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye for now.